Today, light appeared above the Temple Mount. The word spread through Jerusalem's narrow streets faster than the morning breeze. Markets that had been bustling with early trade fell silent. Shopkeepers stopped mid-sentence, their eyes drawn upward as if by an invisible hand. Even the cats that prowled the ancient stones paused their wandering, alert to something imperceptible to ordinary senses. It began with the archaeologists, a small team working on a discreet excavation near the southern wall. For months, they had carefully sifted through layers of history, documenting pottery shards and architectural fragments from the Second Temple period. But this morning was different. Dr. Eliana Cohen, lead archaeologist of the project, had arrived earlier than usual. The golden light brushed the ancient stones as she descended into the excavation pit, her experienced hands moving carefully across a newly exposed section of wall. That's when she felt it, a hollow space behind what appeared to be solid stone. "Ahmed," she called to her colleague, her voice unusually quiet, "bring the small camera." Within hours, the news had spread throughout the old city, though no mainstream channels had picked it up yet. Perhaps they never would. Some truths reveal themselves only to those meant to witness them. An old merchant near the Dung Gate whispered to his customers, "I've waited my whole life for this." When asked what he meant, he simply pointed toward the archaeological site and quoted from the Book of Daniel. "But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end." By midday, a crowd had gathered at the barriers surrounding the excavation. Jews, Christians, Muslims, all drawn by something they couldn't explain. Many stood in silence, phones lowered, as if technology itself seemed inappropriate in this moment. "We all felt it," a woman from America said later, "even those who came as skeptics." Inside the cordoned area, Dr. Cohen and her team worked with painstaking precision. What they had discovered was a small chamber, sealed and untouched for what appeared to be thousands of years. And within it, a cylindrical object wrapped in what remained of linen cloth, a scroll. Not just any scroll, this one bore markings unlike any they had seen before. The container was sealed with a substance that had hardened like stone, preserving whatever lay within from the ravages of time. As the sun began its descent behind the city walls, casting long shadows across the excavation site, Dr. Cohen made a decision that would change everything. Instead of following standard archaeological protocol, which would mean months of laboratory testing before the contents were revealed, she authorized the immediate opening of the scroll container. "I don't know why," she would later tell her colleagues at Hebrew University. "Something told me it couldn't wait." What happened next would be described differently by each witness present. Some spoke of a subtle vibration that passed through the ground. Others mentioned a change in the quality of light, as if the air itself had become thinner, more permeable to something beyond. A rabbi standing nearby whispered Zechariah's words, "On that day his feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives that lies before Jerusalem on the east." A Christian pilgrim responded with words from Revelation, "Behold, he is coming with the clouds, and every eye will see him." As the seal on the ancient container was carefully broken, a small puff of air escaped, air that had been trapped since before the destruction of the Second Temple. Dr. Cohen later described it as carrying the scent of cedar and something else, something unfamiliar yet strangely recognizable. The crowd grew silent, even those at the farthest edges. For a moment, even the birds above the mount circled and vanished. Inside the container was a single scroll, its parchment remarkably preserved. And written upon it in ancient Hebrew script were words that Dr. Cohen recognized immediately. Words from the Book of Daniel, but with passages no scholar had ever seen before. "My friend, can you feel it in your spirit? The veil between now and then, between earth and heaven, grows thinner in moments like these. Just take a moment and feel what's moving through Jerusalem tonight. What happened today stopped a city, but what's coming will stop the world. I was standing near the western wall when I saw it. Twilight had fallen over Jerusalem, and the city glowed violet as the prayers echoed between ancient stones. Pilgrims raised their phones, but no one dared to speak above a whisper. Something sacred hung in the air, an expectancy that seemed to vibrate from the very ground. Word of the discovery had spread, though strangely, no major news networks had picked up the story. They don't want you to see what's really happening. But truth has its own momentum, especially in this city where heaven and earth have always maintained their closest conversation. Dr. Avraham Levi, one of the world's foremost experts in Second Temple period texts, moved carefully through the crowd that had gathered near the excavation site. At 78, his steps were measured, but his eyes remained sharp. When Dr. Cohen had called him, he had left his dinner untouched on the table. "It can't be authenticated this quickly," he had protested over the phone. "You need to see it, Avi," was all she said. Now, as he entered the temporary structure erected over the excavation, the heat of the day gave way to cool, controlled air. Security was tight. 3 armed guards stood at the entrance, checking credentials with unusual thoroughness. Inside, under specialized lights, Dr. Cohen and 2 graduate students bent over the scroll. They looked up as he entered, their faces bearing expressions he had rarely seen on academics, a mixture of awe and uncertainty. "It's been photographed?" he asked, protocol always his first concern. "Every centimeter," Dr. Cohen confirmed. "But there's something unusual about the text." Levi donned gloves and approached. The parchment, if that's what it was, didn't look like the Dead Sea material he had worked with for decades. It had a subtle luminescence that the specialized lights couldn't explain. "The carbon dating will take weeks," one of the students said. Dr. Levi nodded absently, his attention fixed on the script before him. The characters were Aramaic and Hebrew, flowing in a hand both ancient and somehow precise beyond the capabilities of period scribes. "It's Daniel," he whispered after several minutes of silence. "The vision of the end times. But this," he pointed to a section of text, "this isn't in any known manuscript." From outside came the sound of chanting, pilgrims gathering, drawn by an intuition that transcended religious boundaries. As Dr. Levi began to translate the unknown passages, a graduate student transcribed his words. The text spoke of a final revelation, not just to a chosen few, but a unveiling that would be witnessed across the world simultaneously. It described signs in specific sequence: first Jerusalem, then the desert, then the seas, then the heavens. "There shall be signs in the heavens and on the earth." "Trembling," murmured Dr. Cohen, quoting scripture. "But that's in Luke," said Levi. But this text predates the New Testament by at least 2 centuries based on the script style. As night fully descended over Jerusalem, something remarkable occurred. Witnesses would later describe it differently, but all agreed on the essentials. A circular cloud, unlike any weather formation, appeared above the Temple Mount. It remained stationary despite the evening breeze, glowing with an interior light that pulsed with subtle rhythms. Inside the examination room, they were unaware of this phenomenon, focused intensely on the text before them. Dr. Levi's translation revealed something astonishing. The scroll contained not only prophecy, but precise instructions for its own revelation. It specified this exact date, described the exact location of its discovery, and even named a woman of Cohen lineage who would uncover it. Dr. Eliana Cohen felt a chill move through her body. "Well, there's more," Levi said, his finger tracing the ancient script. "It says, the revelation comes in stages. The first signs will appear to all, but only those who are watching will recognize their meaning." A young research assistant who had been monitoring social media on her phone suddenly gasped, "Dr. Cohen, you need to see this." She turned her phone to reveal hundreds of posts showing the strange cloud formation above the Temple Mount. visible now to everyone in the city. Videos showed it pulsing with light in a pattern that somehow seemed intentional. An older woman who had been quietly assisting with the documentation suddenly began reciting from the Book of Acts. "And it shall come to pass in the last days, says God, that I will pour out of my Spirit on all flesh. Your sons and your daughters shall prophesy. Your young men shall see visions. Your old men shall dream dreams." We all felt it that night. Even those who came as tourists left as pilgrims. Something was unfolding, not hidden but revealed precisely as the ancient text had foretold. Dr. Levi worked through the night, translating section after section. The scroll detailed a sequence of revelations that would unfold over 40 days. It named specific locations around Jerusalem where further signs would appear. And most remarkably, it described technological aspects of our modern world with uncanny precision, speaking of a time when all eyes could witness the same moment across the breadth of the earth, and when the words of prophets would travel faster than the wind. My friend, can you feel it in your spirit? The words written thousands of years ago, speaking directly to this moment, your moment. The mainstream media isn't covering this, but the truth can't stay hidden forever. What happened tonight in Jerusalem is just the beginning. The next sign will come at dawn. Be ready. From the Mount of Olives to the old city gates, silence spread. The morning came with unusual clarity. The heat shimmered over the domes as pilgrims and locals alike gathered on rooftops and at vantage points throughout the city. They were waiting, though many couldn't have explained exactly what they were waiting for. News of the scroll had spread through channels that existed beneath the surface of official communication. WhatsApp groups, Telegram channels, word of mouth passed between strangers who suddenly felt like family, united by a shared secret. Dr. Cohen had not slept. Dark circles shadowed her eyes as she stood on the rooftop of the archaeological headquarters, scanning the horizon. Beside her, Dr. Levi reviewed his notes, making small adjustments to his translation. "The scroll specifies the East Gate," he said, his voice hoarse from hours of continuous work. At first light, the East Gate, sealed for centuries, its stones immovable despite numerous historical attempts, faced the rising sun. According to both Jewish and Christian traditions, it was through this gate that the Messiah would eventually enter Jerusalem. As the first rays of sunlight touched the ancient walls, something extraordinary began to unfold. It started as a subtle vibration, so slight that many thought they had imagined it, but within moments the sensation grew stronger. An old merchant said, "I've waited my whole life for this." Across the city, people reported the same phenomenon, a vibration that seemed to emanate not from the ground, but from the air itself. And then, as the sun cleared the horizon, the stones of the East Gate began to emit a sound. Not all heard it the same way. Some described it as a deep, resonant tone, like a massive bell struck once and allowed to vibrate. Others spoke of harmonies that shifted and evolved. A group of musicians from a nearby music school attempted to transcribe what they heard, but each produced a different notation. A woman quoted from Ezekiel, "Then he brought me back to the outer gate of the sanctuary, which faces east, and it was shut. And the Lord said to me, This gate shall remain shut. It shall not be opened, and no one shall enter by it. For the Lord, the God of Israel, has entered by it." What happened next was captured on hundreds of cell phones, yet each recording showed something slightly different. The stones of the gate, massive blocks weighing tons each, began to glow with an inner light that pulsed in rhythm with the vibrations. Dr. Eliana Cohen watched from her vantage point, her scientific mind struggling to categorize what her eyes were witnessing. The scroll had predicted this exact phenomenon, down to the quality of light and the time of day. "It's not hidden," whispered Dr. Levi beside her. "It's revealed only to those meant to see." Throughout the day, experts were called in, geologists, physicists, religious scholars from every tradition. Equipment was set up to measure radiation, seismic activity, sound waves, temperature fluctuations. The results defied conventional explanation. The stones registered as several degrees cooler than the surrounding air, despite the direct sunlight. The vibrations followed mathematical patterns that one physicist described as impossibly complex yet perfectly ordered. By afternoon, international attention had finally turned to Jerusalem. News crews set up at various points around the old city, though their reporting remained cautious, filled with phrases like alleged phenomenon and mass psychological event. But you, my friend, can you feel it in your spirit? The difference between witnessing and truly seeing. In the examination room, Dr. Cohen and her team continued their careful study of the scroll. The text had now been fully photographed, digitized, and preliminary translations made of approximately 60% of its contents. What they found aligned with biblical prophecy, but expanded upon it in ways that answered questions scholars had debated for centuries. It spoke of a final revelation that would unfold in stages, first to Jerusalem, then to the world. It described a time when the ancient and the new would speak with one voice, and when the sealed would become unsealed. As evening approached, a small earthquake, measuring 3.2 on the Richter scale, shook the city briefly. It lasted only seconds, but its epicenter was precisely at the East Gate. When the dust settled, observers noticed something remarkable. A thin crack had appeared in the sealed gate, running from top to bottom in a perfectly straight line. Someone remembered Joel's prophecy, and the crowd went silent. "And I will show wonders in the heavens and on the earth, blood and fire and columns of smoke. The sun shall be turned to darkness, and the moon to blood, before the great and awesome day of the Lord comes." That night, as stars appeared above Jerusalem, Dr. Levi made a discovery in the text that left him speechless for several minutes. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled. The scroll names this exact date, not just the day but the year, written over 2,000 years ago. The mathematical probability of such precision by chance was effectively zero. We all felt it that evening, a sense that time itself was bending, that past and future were meeting in this present moment. Even skeptics fell silent, their arguments suddenly hollow against the weight of what was unfolding. The scroll had predicted not only the phenomena, but the world's response: disbelief from many, profound recognition from some, and a gradual awakening as the sequence of signs continued to manifest exactly as foretold. I don't know why I felt to share this, but someone needed to hear it. The signs are speaking to those with eyes to see and ears to hear. They said it ended tonight, but dawn hasn't come yet. It began like a whisper from the stones. The rain came unexpectedly to Jerusalem. Wind swept through the alleys like a warning, driving pilgrims and observers to shelter. The lamps reflected on wet cobblestones as thousands huddled beneath awnings and inside doorways. Yet few left the old city despite the sudden storm. 4 days had passed since the discovery of the scroll. 4 days of phenomena that defied explanation. The luminous cloud that remained stationed above the Temple Mount, regardless of wind direction. The vibrations from the East Gate that continued day and night in patterns mathematicians now described as carrying embedded information. The crack in the sealed gate that widened imperceptibly each hour. The world had taken notice, but reactions varied wildly. Scientific teams from 12 countries had established monitoring stations throughout Jerusalem. Religious leaders issued statements ranging from calls for calm to proclamations of imminent apocalypse. Social media platforms struggled under the weight of millions searching for information, sharing experiences, forming instant communities around what was unfolding. Maybe it's not hidden. Maybe it's revealed only to those meant to see. Dr. Cohen had barely left the scroll for 4 days, sleeping on a cot beside the examination table. The translation was now complete, and what it revealed was staggering in its implications. The text described not just the phenomena already witnessed, but detailed what would come next. According to the scroll, the fifth day would bring a gathering, people drawn to Jerusalem from across the world without knowing why. The text called them the Watchers, and those who carry the mark of recognition in their spirits. As rain pounded the roof of the examination facility, Dr. Cohen looked at the latest satellite images on her tablet. What she saw confirmed the scroll's prediction with chilling accuracy. Air traffic to Israel had doubled in 48 hours. Roads from neighboring countries showed unprecedented traffic flows toward Jerusalem. Hotels were filled beyond capacity, and makeshift accommodations had sprung up in parks and open spaces. People were coming by the thousands. A pilgrim whispered, "The heavens just touched the earth." Outside, despite the driving rain, the crowd around the East Gate continued to grow. They stood silent, faces turned upward into the downpour as if receiving a baptism. Among them were people of every faith tradition, Orthodox Jews praying quietly, Christians with hands raised, Muslims on prayer rugs, Buddhists in meditation, and thousands who claimed no religious affiliation but had felt compelled to come. Dr. Levi, who had finally been convinced to rest at his home for a few hours, called Dr. Cohen just after midnight. "Eliana?" His voice crackled over the poor connection. "Turn on your television." Any channel. She found a small TV in the break room and switched it on. Every major network was broadcasting the same thing. Massive auroras had appeared simultaneously around the world. In regions where such phenomena were unknown, the equator, the tropics, sheets of colored light now danced across the sky. But unlike typical auroras, these formations appeared to have structure, patterns that repeated and evolved. It's exactly as the scroll described," Levi said through the phone. "Lights that speak in the heavens, visible to all nations at once." By dawn, the rain had stopped. What emerged over Jerusalem defied meteorological explanation. A double rainbow of unusual brightness, forming a complete circle centered directly above the Temple Mount. Beneath it, the gathering had grown to hundreds of thousands. A woman nearby quoted from Acts 9, her voice trembling, "And in the last days it shall be, God declares, that I will pour out my Spirit on all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams." At precisely noon, as the scroll had foretold, a sound like a great trumpet echoed across the city. It came from everywhere and nowhere, heard simultaneously by all present. Equipment set up to capture audio registered the sound, but could not identify its source. In that moment, something remarkable occurred. A spontaneous silence fell over the massive crowd. People of different faiths, languages, and backgrounds who had been strangers moments before turned to one another with recognition in their eyes. Many embraced, others wept silently. Dr. Cohen, who had made her way to the East Gate to witness this moment, found herself standing next to an elderly Muslim imam and a young Orthodox rabbi. Without words, they reached for each other's hands. "We are witnessing the beginning," the imam said quietly. The rabbi nodded. "Not the end, the beginning." The scroll had described this moment as the recognition, when divisions would temporarily fall away in the face of something greater than any single tradition could contain. By evening, the phenomenon had evolved again. The crack in the East Gate had widened enough that a thin shaft of light now penetrated through to the other side. As the sun set, this beam of light projected onto the ground, forming what appeared to be letters in an ancient script. Dr. Levi, who had joined Dr. Cohen at the site, photographed these markings and compared them to the scroll text. "It's the same," he whispered. "Exact same script." The markings spelled out a date, the following day, and a specific hour. "Can you feel it, my friend? The culmination approaches." Something that has been in motion for millennia is reaching its revelation point. Throughout the night, more people arrived in Jerusalem, drawn by news reports and by something deeper, an intuition that transcended explanation. They came despite closed airports, despite warnings from governments to avoid the region due to overcrowding concerns. They came on foot when vehicles could no longer pass through the congested roads. The scroll had named this gathering precisely, "From the four corners they will come, bearing witness. The number will be beyond counting, yet each one known." I was there when it began. I watched as ancient prophecy aligned with present reality in ways that could not be coincidence. The mathematical probability alone would defy calculation. What happened today united a city divided for centuries. But what's coming will unite a world. A woman next to me began to cry. She said she'd seen this before, in a dream. Dawn broke over Jerusalem with unusual clarity. The air above the city felt different, charged with expectancy, vibrant with possibility. From the Mount of Olives to the Western Wall, from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre to the Dome of the Rock, people stood in silent anticipation. The night had brought more signs. Constellations appeared to shift position momentarily before returning to their established patterns, a celestial dance witnessed by astronomers globally. The phenomenon was simultaneously recorded at observatories in Chile, Hawaii, South Africa, and Australia, eliminating the possibility of local atmospheric conditions. Morning revealed the East Gate transformed. The crack that had been widening for days now formed a perfect archway of light, not physically open, but illuminated from within by a radiance that observers described as living light. Scientists who attempted to measure its properties found their equipment functioning erratically in its presence. Dr. Cohen stood with Dr. Levi at their designated observation point near the Dung Gate. Both had slept little in the 5 days since the discovery. Both had been transformed by what they had witnessed. "The scroll specified noon," Levi said, checking his watch unnecessarily. Everyone knew what time it was. Everyone felt the moment approaching. Some say coincidence. The faithful know its alignment. At precisely 11:11 a.m., birds began to gather. First hundreds, then thousands. Species that normally never flew together now moved in synchronized patterns above the old city. Doves and ravens, sparrows and hawks, forming concentric circles that rotated in opposite directions. A rabbi whispered Zechariah's words, "And the Lord will be king over all the earth. On that day, the Lord will be one, and his name one." Dr. Cohen's phone rang. A call from the examination facility where the scroll remained under constant observation. "Dr. Cohen," came the urgent voice of her assistant. "The scroll is changing." "What do you mean, changing?" she demanded. "The text, it's shifting. New words are appearing." She and Levi exchanged glances before running toward the facility, pushing through the massive crowd that had now grown so dense that movement was nearly impossible. When they finally reached the examination room, breathless and disoriented, they found their research team standing in a circle around the scroll, faces illuminated by a subtle glow emanating from the ancient parchment. Before their eyes, ink was appearing on previously blank sections, flowing across the surface as if an invisible hand were writing in real time. The script matched the original text perfectly. One of the graduate students, who had been photographing the phenomenon, looked up with tears streaming down her face. "It's describing what's happening outside right now. It knows." Dr. Cohen bent over the text, reading the freshly appearing words. They spoke of a moment of collective awakening, not the end of the world, but the beginning of a new understanding. As noon approached, a hush fell over Jerusalem. The massive crowd, now estimated at over 1 million people, grew so quiet that the sound of birds' wings could be heard overhead. The vibration that had been emanating from the East Gate for days grew stronger, resonating at a frequency that people described as touching something deep within. A pilgrim whispered, The heavens just touched the earth. At exactly 12 o'clock, the phenomenon that would later be called the Revelation began. It started as a column of light, not from above, but emanating from the ground at the Temple Mount. It rose slowly, expanding outward, visible to everyone in Jerusalem, and broadcast live across the world to an estimated audience of 3 billion viewers. Within this column, observers reported seeing images, different for each person, yet somehow universally significant. Some described seeing scenes from human history, others reported visions of possible futures. Many spoke of encountering figures from their own lives, loved ones long gone, or children not yet born. A Christian tourist from America described it later. It wasn't like watching a movie. It was like remembering something I'd always known, but somehow forgotten. Inside the examination facility, the scroll continued its miraculous transformation. The new text now spoke directly to this moment, describing the column of light and explaining its purpose, not to end, but to awaken, not to separate, but to unite, a reminder of what was known at the beginning. As the light reached its zenith, extending hundreds of feet into the air above Jerusalem, something remarkable happened in the crowd. People began to speak to one another, strangers from different countries, different faiths, different walks of life, with perfect understanding despite language barriers. This phenomenon lasted exactly 40 minutes. When it finally subsided, the column of light gradually retracted, not disappearing but condensing into a small, brilliant point of light at the center of the Temple Mount. This light remained, pulsing gently like a heartbeat. In the aftermath, Dr. Cohen and her team worked to document everything: the completed scroll text, the thousands of testimonies, the scientific measurements that defied conventional explanation. What emerged was not a single interpretation, but a tapestry of understanding that transcended any one religious or cultural framework. The scroll's final passage, which appeared just as the light column retracted, read, "This is not the end of Revelation, but its continuation. What was sealed is now open. What was hidden is now seen. The message is written not in stone, but in living hearts, to be carried forward." We were all there when it happened. We all witnessed something beyond our capacity to fully comprehend. Even those who watched through screens felt its resonance. Can you feel it in your spirit, my friend? This is not a story of endings, but of beginnings. The prophets spoke of a day when light would return to Zion, not as judgment, but as invitation. I don't know why I felt to share this, but someone needed to hear it. What happened in Jerusalem that day changed those who witnessed it, but the change that's coming will transform the world. The scroll from Jerusalem wasn't just a historical artifact. It was a living bridge between what was and what will be. Its words matched Daniel's final vision exactly, yet expanded it into our present moment. Write in the comments, "Maranatha, come, Lord Jesus." The story isn't over. It's only beginning.